Screenwriting is not a matter of what you know. It's also not a matter of who you know. It's both. We've spent a lot of time talking about the what, so today we're going to talk about the who.
Who are you?
I'm Nathan Graham Davis. I'm a Hollywood screenwriter living in Massachusetts, and this is class 11 of Delusional. If this is the first video you've seen from this series, then congratulations, you have stumbled across a one-of-a-kind 15-week screenwriting course. If you want to know more, go check out class 0 where you can see if this is for you. For those of you following along, by now you're likely finished with your first act and well into act 2, which is awesome. You are closer than you think. Remember, this is all about getting the first draft down so that you have something that you can revise. As an early mentor of mine liked to say, don't get it right, get it written. Keep that momentum up. We will be doing a much deeper dive into Act 2 next week, so if you find yourself having trouble, that should help keep you going. Today's class is the first one related to networking and the business, and there's a reason that I've held off on talking about this for so long. These things are totally important, but they're meaningless if you don't have an exceptional screenplay. Building that foundation of craft is critical. If you've done all the assignments, then you have definitely begun that process in a way that's much faster and much more intentional than mine ever was. Not only have you been doing a lot of writing, but you've been doing a lot of reading and studying in order to help these concepts gel better. That doesn't mean that things are going to be easy from here on out. You would be an insane outlier if you made something happen with this first script of yours. But you're off to a great start, so take some pride in that and let's shift gears for today. Because the truth is, it's not all about craft. Spend enough time in any screenwriting circle, whether it's in person or in an online group, on Reddit, whatever, and you will hear people talk about how this is a business of who you know. Many people will say this in a way that's cynical, saying that it's literally all about who you know and that Hollywood is all about nepotism. And I can kind of understand how people might come to this conclusion. There are a lot of people who have worked very hard and found it impossible to get read, let alone get any traction. As I said at the beginning of the video, it's not all about who you know, but it is an important factor because, as I've said multiple times in this class already, just getting somebody to read your script in Hollywood can be extremely difficult. There are so many scripts and screenwriters out there and only so many movies to be made. When you do have material that's ready, knowing someone who can give you a quality referral can go a really long way.
Allow me to introduce you.
When writers realize how important connections are, many of them feel hopeless. But they totally shouldn't. And as somebody who lives in Massachusetts and who started out with 0 connections, I feel pretty qualified to speak on this. And so I'm gonna. The first thing that I want you to do is to adopt a long-term mindset. And I've talked about this before. I've already stressed that it will take a number of years to learn to write at a professional level. That was true for me, and it's true for nearly every other pro that I know. It takes a long time to become great at anything, and make no mistake, great is the requirement. But if you've already accepted this idea, then you've already adopted a long-term mindset with your writing. Now you just need to adopt that in terms of your network. You are probably not going to meet a bunch of people who are well-positioned in the industry in the next year or so. But let's say it takes you 5 or 10 years before your writing is up to par. Well, if you also invest that time into putting yourself out there and connecting with other people, in 5 or 10 years, your network could be pretty phenomenal. And then when you finally are ready, you'll have people who want to see you succeed and who will be more than happy to help you. It's a pretty simple concept and it's totally doable, but far too many writers put off meeting people until their writing is ready, and then they wrongly expect things to just happen. Or just as bad, they go about meeting people in the wrong way. There is a wrong way, and there's a reason that people hate networking. It often feels transactional, and transactional feels gross. And very few people want to be used, and not many people want others to feel like they're using them either. And also, if it's somebody who's higher up the career ladder than you are, unless it's some one-off situation that's mutually beneficial, there's always this awkward one-sidedness to it. They know that it's more meaningful for you to connect with them than the other way around, and the higher up they are, the more clear it'll be that you want something from them, the more on guard they're likely to be about that, and the more awkward it's going to be in general. So how do you get around all that, especially when you're also perfectly well aware that you need connections to move forward? It is possible even if you're not naturally extroverted. Networking is a skill that can be learned. Let's start out with the basics. Never forget that people in this business, regardless of their success level, are still people. They have families and friends and hobbies and interests and quirks and flaws and pets and probably some favorite sports teams. And if they're involved in film in any way, they're almost certainly huge movie nerds. This is a really tough business. There are few other good reasons to get into it. All of this is great news for you because it means that they have things that are in common with you, which means you'd probably hit it off if you just connected on that level. So in addition to your long-term mindset, adopt the mindset of just trying to make friends. When you meet someone, if you connect with them on a shared interest or background, that gross feeling almost instantly goes away. This also means being okay with it if you don't connect with everyone, because you probably won't. There are two things that will get in your way faster than just about anything else, especially in this business. Those things are negativity or cynicism and desperation. There's a lot of that out there. All over, you see people complaining about the system or gatekeepers or how the universe is stacked against them. You see people complaining on public forums about how much movies suck these days, which is not actually that smart given that some of the people who work on them are probably people you'd like to hire you or help you. And you see a lot of people out there who are basically begging for someone to take a chance on them. All of that is pretty much a non-starter. I do get it. It's hard to make progress in this world, and it's easy to get cynical about that. And when you've been at it for like a number of years with no success whatsoever, it's also really easy to feel desperate. But look at it from the perspective of somebody who's already in the industry and whose acquaintance you'd like to make. It's also a hard business for them, always. And the last thing that you want when something's already hard is more negativity. People want to be around people who are positive. And as for desperation, the problem with that is, in addition to being somewhat negative itself, it also kind of suggests that there's like a reason you haven't been successful. And that's not a look that you want. You don't need to come across as some like too positive Pollyanna. That can get kind of annoying, honestly. And you definitely don't want to come across as arrogant, but do take these things under advisement. If you find yourself slipping toward either of them, just do yourself a favor and take a deep breath. The flip side of all this is that as much as people are turned off by negativity, they tend to be excited by people who are doing things. So what's that mean? Because like writing a screenplay is doing something, right? And in non-film circles, it totally is. Like if you bump into somebody outside of LA and you tell them you've written a screenplay, that tends to pique people's interest because, as I've said many times in this class already, a lot of people say they would like to write a screenplay, but most people don't ever do it. In LA and in film circles, everybody has a script. It doesn't stand out, and worse still, the moment you bring it up, people are going to get scared that you're about to ask them to read it. But if you're doing something beyond that, like making your own short film, making a micro-budget feature, and especially if there's something unique about it, that's more interesting. And it doesn't have to be that kind of thing either. You know, my YouTube series Reentry caught a lot of people's interest because it was different. It also showed discipline and drive, and my network expanded because of that. A couple years ago, when I was still working my day job, I found out that a client of mine had a son who was making movies with his friends. I told her that I was a screenwriter, Aftermath had been optioned by that point, and it was on its way to production, so I offered to have coffee with their son. I met with him, and he was a 20-year-old guy who had just this great energy about him. He'd been shooting a bunch of shorts, and he showed me some of them, and, they were okay. They didn't really stand out, but here's the thing. He was out there doing it regularly. He was getting after it. He'd even built up a business of his own, making commercials for local businesses, and he was just, getting out there and hustling. He was doing things in a way that you just don't normally see, and that energy and drive were clear, and I could tell that they were special, and so I stayed in touch with him. I watched on social media as his work got better and better, and now it's beginning to look great. At one point, he texted me to let me know that he had just decided to up and fly to LA just to see who he could meet, so I connected him with 4 industry professionals. He had coffee with 3 of them. I didn't even think about doing that. Why? It's because this guy has the drive that it takes to succeed, and that's rare, and that makes it exciting. The people he met with totally saw it too. And what tends to be true is that people are more than happy to support someone like that. The other reason I did that is because people have done that kind of thing for me in the past, and it's fun to be able to pay it forward. This business is not nearly as cynical as people would have you believe. When you show yourself to be somebody who works your ass off and who has a great attitude, it can go a really long way. So be someone who does something. And doing something can even be something that's just like barely adjacent to the film industry. But if there's something unique about it that sets you apart and shows that you're driven to make things happen, people are going to take note of that, and some of them will be curious to see where things take you. They won't be able to help themselves. When you do meet somebody who's successful and who's worked on projects you've loved, that can be really exciting. Absolutely go ahead and share your admiration for that project. Just try not to come across like some starstruck superfan. Your aim should be to come across like something closer to a peer, or at least as somebody who they can take seriously. Freaking out ruins that. Asking a ton of questions ruins that. Asking an interesting question that they don't get every day is cool, but asking for an autograph is probably going to ruin that. Selfies, those kind of depend on the situation. I would say just think of it like you would think of selfies with colleagues. You're not going to take one with someone at your day job immediately after shaking their hand for the first time. But if you're out having drinks together and having a great time, you very well might. With all this stuff, just try and remove yourself from the fan mindset and treat them like a normal person. Speaking of normal people, here's something that I've never understood. So many people don't bother networking and connecting with their actual peers. If you are starting out, you 100% should be making friends with other people who are just starting out, especially other writers. Will those connections help you today or tomorrow? No, probably not, but that's okay. You're not being transactional about this stuff. You're in it with a long-term mindset, and you're in it to make friends. And here's how things tend to work. Over the next year or two, let's say you connect with 25 other budding screenwriters and maybe a few budding actors and directors. You trade your work for notes with the writers, you help out on the short films that the directors make, and you invite actors to do table reads on your work, which gives them a chance to practice lines and meet other people. In the year or two following that, maybe half those people will stop pursuing film, but not you. You're driven and you're motivated, and a handful of these people will also be just as driven and motivated as you are. And you'll remain friends with most of them because you connect on that level. All of you will make more things, you'll become better at your respective crafts, and you'll meet more people as you go. Except that the new people you connect with will, on average, be a little more driven and a little better at what they do, just like you are now. Some of these connections will cross-pollinate with that first group of friends that you made, and their new connections will cross-pollinate with you, and your professional circle grows bigger, and it also becomes more refined. Because you don't quit, this keeps happening, and suddenly a few people inside your circle are having real success, which means you get a first-hand look at that. You get insider knowledge, and just as importantly, you get inspired by it. Those of you in the circle who don't quit grow stronger, you all continue meeting more people. Some of them are definitely now successful, and the number of people in your circle who are actually professionals grows. And as you grow, that circle may very well include people who are assistants or even lower-level executives at studios. It may include some up-and-coming producers or reps. This is how it worked and continues to work for me, and this is how it works for most people who succeed. It's not gross, it's just as simple as making friends and remaining friends and staying motivated. And then one day you wake up and suddenly you are surrounded by success. And by the way, in case this could be taken in any other way, obviously you'll still remain friends with some of the people who stopped being involved in film. You'll have connected on other levels as well. I'm not suggesting that you be a self-interested ladder climber or cut these people out. So much of being a writer is simply living a full life, and that includes having friends for the sake of having friends. But what tends to happen because you're so passionate and motivated about film is that you form your strongest film-centric relationships with people who are similar. And over a long enough time, with just a little bit of intention applied to meeting people, that can result in things that are pretty cool. And what's really cool is if you're doing this course right, you're taking it alongside a group of writers. For those of you who keep writing, I cannot overstate how valuable you are going to become to each other, and I would bet money that some of you will remain friends for 5 or 10 years or even for the rest of your lives. So congrats on already doing exactly what you should be doing. So I've talked long enough about the reason for meeting people and the mindset that you need to do it, but how do you actually meet them? Where do you find them? Here's a list of the best possible ways to make great connections in the film business, roughly in order. First up, be born with great connections or have them before you start. If that's you, that's amazing. Don't feel bad about it, but do recognize the privilege it affords you. Don't blow it, and maybe try and reach back and pay it forward when you do manage to get somewhere. That'll be appreciated and you'll have fun doing it. This doesn't apply to most people though. It certainly didn't apply to me, so let's keep going down the list. Second, get a job working in the business. There are lots of jobs in the business that will have you meeting a lot of people. Most of them are in LA, but that's expanded a bit these past few years. Atlanta, New York, Vancouver, Toronto, and several other metro areas have a lot of companies and gigs that feed into the Hollywood system. Additionally, many states, like my beloved Massachusetts, have tax incentives for film. That means that productions happen there, which means you can potentially work on them. When I was on set for my movie Aftermath, which just happened to shoot here thanks to those tax incentives, I was so excited to learn that 80% of the crew were local, and they were a professional union crew who were getting regular work on Hollywood films right here in the Bay State. So that's a thing. Beyond sets, there are entry-level jobs to be had at major companies. Mailrooms, interns, assistants, etc. All of those lead to lots of new connections. Many stars and successful people in this business hire personal assistants. Those jobs often go to normal, hardworking people, and those people learn a lot. What these entry-level gigs do have in common, though, is long hours, low pay, and all too often a large feeling of thanklessness. And they tend to skew toward younger people, too. But they are an incredible way to meet people and learn about the business, and I know several professional writers who started out that way. Just be aware that it may not be sustainable. If you want to write for a living, those super long hours, which are also a reality on set, make it tough to find time to write. Number 3 on the list, live in LA. The business is decentralizing a bit, but LA is still by and large the center of the film universe. If you go to a gym, a bar, or a kid's soccer game in LA, you're going to run into other people in the business almost every single time. Not only does it make meeting people easier, it also makes maintaining those relationships easier. I know a lot of people in LA, but I don't get to see them much. I don't get to grab a spur-of-the-moment coffee or go to the odd party, so that is a disadvantage for me. LA is super expensive. It's not for everyone, but it really can't be beat in terms of growing your network. Okay, number 4, and also incidentally, also the 4th thing on this list that I haven't done, go to a great film school. No one is looking for a film degree on your resume when they hire you to write, but at the best of schools, you're going to make a lot of meaningful connections. Most people will be super passionate and motivated peers, like I mentioned before, but you might also hit it off with professors and other people you meet there, and they will have connections that can be a huge help. A friend of mine had a professor who was blown away by their script, so they sent it to a showrunner and it resulted in a job. But this only really applies to a handful of schools. They're all expensive, and those degrees are kind of meaningless both in and outside of film, so they're not a fit for everybody. So let's move on to number 5. Tell everyone you know that you're writing a screenplay. About 3 years after I started writing screenplays, my wife, who I was with all the way back then and who enjoys writing prose and poetry, started a tiny just-for-fun writers group with 2 other friends. I tagged along one day and wrote a couple pages of my newest script, and I read them out loud at the end. It turned out that one of my wife's friends, who I'd also known for a few years, had a dad who was in the business. She liked my wife enough and my writing enough that she hooked up a weekend at his house, and I suddenly found out that I was having cigars and drinks with an insanely successful showrunner. He ended up reading my script a couple months later, and although I definitely don't think it was deserving, he referred me to his agent. It didn't result in anything. I wasn't ready. But it was a wild lesson because that first in-person Hollywood connection that I had ever made was through a friend that I'd known for a while, and he's given me a bunch of great advice over the years. Since then, I've met a number of people through random mutual connections. It's that whole 6 degrees thing. There are a lot of people who just happen to know somebody in the business, and if you tell people about what you're doing, some of them may volunteer that information. They might even offer to make an intro. So talk about what you're doing. You never know. All right, number 6. In most places, there are other people who are interested in film or screenwriting. I live in a pretty small area, but when I was starting out, I was able to find a local screenwriting group and I attended it a number of times. I found after a while that most of the people in the group weren't as serious about screenwriting as I was, and that's not surprising given that it was a local group, but a few of them were, and I'm still friends with those guys today. Each of them is doing really cool things, and we continue to hang out, trade scripts, and give each other feedback, and I am super grateful for those friendships. I've also become friends with several local WGA screenwriters, all of whom are more successful than I am, as well as 2 SAG actors, one of whom wound up in my movie, and a director who just made a $1 million movie last year. All of them live within a 30-minute drive. This is a small area. It's an artsy one, but there are lots of places like this in the country, and I bet you'd be surprised to find out who lives near you. When you discover someone's in your area, look them up and offer to buy them a coffee. If you're not in a film hub where this kind of thing is common, there's a good shot they'll take you up on it. There may also be an actors group near you, and guess what? Those actors are looking for opportunities to practice. They may actually be excited about the opportunity to do a table read on your script, which is a great learning experience and it helps build your network. There could very well be a local nonprofit centered around filmmaking in your region. Do a little research and find out who they are. Next, let's talk film festivals. There are a lot of them. You probably have one within driving distance, and typically even the smallest have at least a couple interesting panels where film professionals are interviewed. I was on a panel like this last year at a tiny festival. There were like 15 people in the audience, but it happened. And for smaller festivals like that one, those people might just be local, which is an awesome way to meet them. For bigger festivals, much more successful panelists than me are often flown out. And additionally, film festivals are also showing films, which is amazing, I know. The filmmakers are usually there, and by simply being present, you might just wind up meeting some of them. And even if you don't, because they're likely to be holding court and meeting a ton of people at once, and they probably already have friends there, even so, their presence is going to draw more passionate and motivated people who are interested in growing their own careers. And if you make the smallest of efforts, it's a great place to meet some of them. The absolute best festival to meet other screenwriters is the Austin Film Fest. You might think that the premier screenwriting conference would be in LA, but no, it's actually held in Austin every October, and screenwriters flock there to hear writers, directors, and producers of their favorite movies talk about the craft and the business. I went there for the first time in 2024 after hearing about it for years, and it totally lived up to the hype. If you're serious about this, at some point, make the pilgrimage. I guarantee you'll learn a lot and probably make some great friends. Also, one more thing about film festivals. They almost always run on volunteers. And many of those volunteers are, you guessed it, passionate and motivated film people. So if you have a local one, why not volunteer? You'll likely get a badge and a free t-shirt, get to watch some free movies, and meet a lot of people in the process. I did this a number of times when I was younger. Number 8, you can work on small movies. People are making movies everywhere, whether they're shorts or micro-budget features, and a great way to meet people and build genuine, meaningful connections is to work on them. It's hard work, and it's almost always unpaid, but it can be a ton of fun. You can find opportunities on specialized sites like Production Hub or less specialized places like Craigslist. Check out the websites for local film organizations, and just look all over social media. Honestly, if you hear about a small production, just reach out and see if you can help. They will often be more than happy to have you. Finally, there's the internet, and although I'm listing this last, it's an incredible and underappreciated resource. And it's the great equalizer for people like me who weren't born with connections, never got an industry job, never lived in LA, and never went to a top film school. And because you're taking this class, I'm going to assume you already know how to use it. I met a couple of my very first industry friends on a now defunct message board for screenwriters on IMDb. I was young and pretty new, but very passionate, and I just kind of stumbled across it. I started out by reading a bunch of posts and then, eventually got involved in commenting on them. And despite most of those screen names being anonymous, over time I got a feel for who the professionals were, and I became friendly with some of them. We sent the odd DMs, they were called private messages back in those days, and eventually a couple people read my work. If you've watched some of my early reentry videos, Jeff Willis was one of those people and Bob Sines was another. Jeff was a development executive at the time, and Bob was a much newer professional screenwriter, but a working professional nonetheless. And their advice and guidance in those early days was super helpful and inspiring to me, and it also taught me something else. There are a lot of people in this business who are happy to offer advice when they appreciate somebody's attitude. And I'm still friends with those guys to this day. Over the next few years, I connected with a ton of other writers through forums like Done Deal Pro and then later Facebook, and so many of those people are now working professionals and still good friends. Now things are even easier. The closest things I know of to any of those old message boards are like Discord and the screenwriting subreddit. I never spent any time on Discord, but I used to spend a lot of time on that subreddit, and the truth is, it could get pretty negative at times. But there were also a lot of great writers and advice to be found there if you made the effort to sift through the crap. You'll also find strong screenwriting communities all over social media like Facebook, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, and more. And on Facebook, you even have groups, both public and private, completely devoted to screenwriting. Many of them are even localized to specific regions, which can be really great if you want to meet people in person. And this is all just the screenwriting stuff. There are just as many ways to meet other types of people in film. And when you've connected with them, we now have Zoom and FaceTime, and those things can help make those relationships all the more meaningful. I realize a lot of what I'm talking about in this class probably sounds obvious, but so few people take advantage of the resources out there. Like I said earlier, it is a huge mistake to just wait until your writing is ready in order to meet people. So take that long-term mindset and use what's at your disposal to start meeting people now. Focus on peers and build out from there. There is something I want to underscore though. When you're a screenwriter, especially a new one, and you meet people in the business, it can feel like this is your one big chance, and there's this temptation to ask for something that'll help you. So here's a handy chart to demonstrate how big those asks are. You'll notice that I put reading a script above helping you move and just below helping you hide a body. Am I being a little tongue-in-cheek here? Obviously. But it is important to be aware of what it means when you're asking somebody to read you. I'm not saying that you need to place industry people on pedestals or walk on eggshells around them, but script reads are a big deal and it's important that you understand why. If the person you're talking to is another writer and you're at a similar level and you ask if they'd like to trade scripts for feedback, they may decline, but that is a perfectly cool and reasonable ask. All writers need notes and there's a mutual exchange. If they're not a writer, or they are but you're not trading scripts, now you're asking them for several hours of their time, likely for nothing in return. Several hours is a lot. There are very few other things that take several hours that we would just ask of other people, yet for some reason, writers ask people to read their scripts all the time. So first of all, you need to consider the relationship when you ask it. If you wouldn't feel comfortable asking them for another big favor, don't ask them to read your script. There are a couple more considerations too. Experienced and successful writers get requests for reads constantly. All writers need notes, and they know that they're likely to get really useful feedback from somebody with experience. The problem is there are far more inexperienced writers than experienced ones, and the most experienced writers already have their circles by that point. They don't have the bandwidth to give notes on 3 extra scripts every single week. Again, it's a lot of work. And so when newer writers ask them to read, it puts them in the often frustrating spot of having to say no because they just don't have the time. And then they risk coming off like a jerk, which sucks, and it can easily make them resent you. On a similar note, anyone with any degree of success in the business probably reads a lot of scripts. So the more successful they are, the bigger of an ask that read becomes. Again, that's largely due to bandwidth, but it's also due to something else. People hate to give people bad news. If a script doesn't work for them, it puts them in the uncomfortable spot of having to say so or lie about it. And many writers, especially new ones, get defensive about feedback. And that really sucks after someone's invested hours of their time into reading their work. These are the things that people think about when they get read requests, and it's why asking for one is such a big deal. I'm not saying that you should never ask for a read. Sometimes you do need to shoot your shot, but just consider the relationship and the size of the ask when you're asking. Also, I'm specifically talking about reads in terms of favors here. It's different when you're querying a manager or a producer to see if they'd like to read it in a professional capacity. Now there's at least some slight potential of there being something in it for them, but they still have limited bandwidth, so be aware of that and keep your expectations in check. The flip side of all this is if someone likes you and happens to have the time to read, they might actually offer. That happens, and if it's a writer offering feedback, absolutely take them up on it. If it's a non-writer who's doing it as a favor, but who has the potential to help you in some way, also take them up on it if you have something that's ready. And if you don't have something that's ready, just say so. They might offer to give you notes on it, and that's fine once the expectation's been set, or they might invite you to just send something whenever it is ready. That's a fantastic situation. But what you don't want to do is cement the idea in someone's head that you're not a good writer and that you don't know what good writing is because you sent them something before it should have been seen. Back to the list, above helping you hide a body is asking for an industry referral. There is a very simple reason why this is such a big deal. Nearly everyone in this business has worked their ass off to get where they are and stay there. And having traded a steady paycheck for this dream these last couple years, I can tell you that it is often intensely stressful. Reputation counts for a ton in this world. If people don't think you have good taste, that hurts you a lot. When people refer a writer to somebody, which absolutely happens, by the way, they're vouching for that writer's work. They need to feel really, really good about it. And this is why, in most cases, you don't ask for referrals. You let people offer. You might let people know that you're looking for representation or that you've got a new script, but typically you don't ask for a referral unless you've got a close enough relationship that the ask won't damage it, regardless of their answer. The other situation where it can totally be appropriate is if you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the person loves your work. A lot of people say nice things because it's uncomfortable to say otherwise. And if you cross that line and ask for a referral and they had actually just told you a white lie, you're now putting them in a really awkward spot. But if you know they love your work, go for it. Just be aware of what it is that you're asking. Again, I want to stress that most of the people in this industry are very cool and you don't need to place them on pedestals. You just need to understand the dynamics of these asks so that you don't put yourself in a weird situation. However, something that you might notice much further down the list is asking someone for advice. Here's a secret to networking. People love giving advice. It makes them feel smart and special, and it's something that they can do relatively quickly without a whole lot of thought or effort, and it's almost universal. Don't be the person who asks questions that somebody gets every single time, but if you have an interesting scenario and you meet somebody who you think can provide a good take on it, ask. Also, a slightly bigger ask, but not at all so big that you're likely to piss somebody off by asking it, is asking if somebody would be up for a coffee or a Zoom. It's totally possible they'll decline, but they might say yes, and it's a great way to connect and learn some things in the process. So let's talk about that a bit, because trying to get an industry professional to have coffee or a Zoom or a phone call with you before the end of the course is going to be one of this week's assignments.
Wait, what?
I absolutely realize this is outside many of your comfort zones, but like I said, this is about a long-term mindset and you should get started now. If this puts you in absolute panic mode and you cannot do it, that's okay. I will leave that up to your judgment. I'd like the legacy of this class to be that you wrote a script that you're really excited about and not that I gave you an unnecessary panic attack. But if this puts you somewhere below panic and merely in the realm of anxiety, I'd like you to try it. So here's the deal. I'm going to have you reach out to 3 industry professionals to see if they'd be up for a coffee or a quick Zoom or a phone call with you. One of these needs to be a screenwriter. For the others, I'd recommend people on the creative side, like actors, directors, composers, that kind of thing. Creative people who have faced enormous odds in order to reach some level of success in this business. There are 2 reasons for this assignment. One is directly related to what we're talking about right now. It's an opportunity to build your network, and it's an exercise that will get you outside your comfort zone when it comes to connecting with people. But the second reason is just as important. Having a one-on-one conversation with somebody who's doing a very exceptional and rare thing that you would someday like to do, and then discovering that they're just a normal person, that can be really inspiring. It can be empowering in a way that few other things are because it suddenly becomes easier to see this as something that you might be able to do. So first of all, who do you contact? No, not me, because that's too obvious. And you should avoid anybody who's a household name or who has a big podcast or a big social media following, that kind of thing. Because of how visible these people are, they get requests like that a lot. And one other principle that you should take from this course is that you never want to be part of the noise. It's almost always better to do the things that nobody else is doing. But there are great writers and directors and actors who have probably been part of things that you love who don't get these requests 8 times a day. And some of them would probably love to hear from you. With writers in particular, they go unsung a lot. Despite millions of people potentially seeing their work, it's pretty rare to hear directly from a random person who loved it. Also, writing culture is pretty supportive, and there are a lot of people who enjoy giving back. Another type of person totally worth reaching out to is somebody more on my level or even where I was like a year ago. Somebody who's kind of recently had their first big break. Maybe they're a writer who just sold a script but they haven't been produced yet, or maybe they're a director who just had a short in Sundance and who's signed with a major agency. People like that are often more accessible than the more established pros, and also because they've broken recently, they might have some great advice for you. If you're outside LA, another great option is to find the names of professionals who live near you, like I was talking about a little bit before. That local connection makes it easier almost instantly, just like how if you have the same alma mater as somebody else, it's totally worth connecting with them. Again, it just makes it that much easier. So how do you find these people? For the names of more established professionals, just look up movies that you've liked from the last 10 years and check out who's involved with them. For the names of less established people who are earlier on in their careers, keep an eye out for things like when people are highlighted on news sites like Deadline, maybe for a recent script sale or a movie deal, or writers who've made the annual blacklist. Once you know who you want to contact, now you just need to find their contact info. Although I would not recommend going through somebody's reps for this because you want it to be more casual than that. There are a lot of people at earlier stages in their career whose emails are listed on IMDb Pro. But a lot of them are also on social media. I wouldn't recommend contacting through Facebook because many people use that in a way that's more private, but other platforms like Instagram, X, and now Blue Sky can be excellent. This is less common with actors, but you would be shocked at the number of successful screenwriters and directors who are active on these platforms and who have like only a few hundred followers. So follow them and shoot them a DM. It can be as easy as that. And if they're not on social, see if they've got a website. They often do, and you can often find their emails there. And if none of those things work, no worries, just move on to the next person on your list. Once you have their contact info, how do you reach out to them? Again, keep it casual, be pleasant, show a little admiration, but don't grovel or be over the top about it, and keep it brief. A wall of text is scary. A quick paragraph or two is not. And here's another tip. Make it crystal clear that you have no interest in asking them to read your script. You'd simply love to connect and hopefully learn a little bit. So if it were Aaron Sorkin, but it probably shouldn't be because he's way too famous and busy, you might write something like this. Hi Aaron, I wanted to get in touch because I'm a new screenwriter and the social network is honestly part of what inspired me to start. I have no interest in asking you to read my script, it's not even ready anyway, but I was wondering if you'd be up for a quick call or Zoom sometime. I'd love to ask a few questions and hear any advice you might have. Oh, and by the way, I just saw you were in deadline for XYZ project. Congrats! Something like that is all you need. If you reach out to 3 people in this way, there's a very reasonable chance that at least someone will take you up on it. When I gave this assignment the first time I did this class, many people had success and some really cool meetings happened. Bare minimum, you'll have an interesting and inspiring conversation with somebody who's doing what you want to do. And if you happen to hit it off, you never know, there's a chance they'll even become a new connection. Do tweak your email a little from the way that I wrote it. There are enough of you that are following this course that it's very possible that a few of you will hit up the same people and you don't want to come across like just another part of the horde. I also probably wouldn't mention this assignment just because you don't want to come across like this isn't genuine. Again, I know this is a little intimidating, but getting outside of your comfort zone is super important, and if you want to do this, that'll be one more thing that's suddenly less scary. And I guarantee you, most of your competition is not out there doing this same kind of thing. In an upcoming class, I'll spend more time talking about specific ways in which you can get your script out there, but hopefully this helps you get the wheels turning and how you can start meeting people. Like normal, a quick reminder about the cost of this course. Do the work and follow the process. It's not a joke when I say that this class isn't free. You're paying yourself. This is an investment in you. If you can stay on track for just a few more classes, you will have completed the first draft of a feature screenplay, and that is going to feel awesome, I promise. The other cost of this course is to pay it forward. If you're getting something out of it, share it with others. Subscribe if you haven't already, hit the like button. It tweaks the algorithm so more people will see it. As for this week's assignments, number 1 is simply getting your 10 to 15 pages done. This will potentially bring you up to the midpoint of your script, which is super exciting. Number 2, spend 20 to 30 minutes making a list of everybody you know who either works in film, works in entertainment, or works in something adjacent to those, or who might just happen to know somebody in the business. Get the wheels turning about who might be in your network. You might be surprised after you spend some time thinking about it. Number 3, and you can use the list that you just created for this one if it helps. Reach out to 3 industry professionals and ask them if they would do a Zoom or a phone call or a coffee. As long as you send the emails, you can count this one as complete. And finally, number 4, read another script from the list of 20. And that's it. I'll see you next week.